The morning my stepmother left for her sister's wedding in Scottsdale, she spent 40 minutes arranging the throw pillows on the living room couch. She straightened the frames on the hallway wall. She watered the 2 succulents on the kitchen windowsill and reminded my father, through the bathroom door while he shaved, to confirm the rental car reservation. She did not come upstairs. I was 14, sitting on the edge of my bed in the clothes I'd slept in, and she did not once come to say goodbye. My father knocked. He was already in his blazer, the one he wore to things that required looking like he had his life together. He said they'd be back in 3 weeks. He said my Aunt Lorraine would check in. He said there was food in the freezer and that I knew how to use the microwave. He said all of this from the doorway, one hand on the frame, the way someone stands when they've already decided to leave. Before he went downstairs, he set something on my dresser. An envelope. Inside was $40 and a Visa gift card still in its plastic wrapping with a small sticker that said, "For emergencies." I watched their car back out of the driveway from my window. I kept watching until it turned the corner and disappeared. Then I sat back down on the bed and did not move for a long time. We lived in a split level on a quiet street in a suburb of Portland, Oregon. The kind of neighborhood where people put seasonal wreaths on their front doors and the garbage cans get rolled to the curb at exactly the right time every Tuesday. My stepmother had moved in when I was 9, 3 years after my mother died. She came with strong opinions about cabinet organization and an allergy to clutter that extended, I came to understand, to children who asked too many questions or took up too much emotional space. My father adored her in the way that lonely men sometimes adore women who make decisions for them. She was efficient. She was competent. She redecorated the living room and planned their vacations and kept a color-coded shared calendar on the refrigerator that had her schedule and his schedule on it, but not mine. I had my own section once. She removed it the year she repainted the kitchen. She said it simplified things. Her name was Renata. I never called her Mom. She never asked me to. That was one of the few things we agreed on without ever discussing it. 3 weeks before they left for Arizona, she called me down to the kitchen table the way she called me down for house meetings, her back straight, hands folded, the particular look she got when she was about to present something as settled that had not actually been discussed. She told me about the wedding. Her youngest sister was getting married at a resort outside Scottsdale, she said. 3 weeks, a family trip that was, as I absorbed quickly, not a family trip that included me. My father was at the counter refilling his coffee. He did not turn around. I asked who would be staying with me. She looked at me the way people look at a misplaced item, brief, slightly irritated, already calculating where to put it. "Your Aunt Lorraine is nearby," she said. "You have everything you need. You're 14, not 4. I didn't ask again. The gift card I discovered on day 2 had a 0 balance. I found this out at the Walgreens 2 blocks from our house, standing at the register with a box of granola bars and a bottle of orange juice, hearing the beep of the declined transaction while the cashier looked at me with that particular blank patience of someone who has seen this before. I put the juice back. I bought the granola bars with $3 from the envelope. $40, 21 days. I did the math walking home. 90 cents per meal if I ate twice a day and spent nothing else. I went to the Fred Meyer on Powell and stood in the discount aisle with my phone calculator open and a basket over my arm. 2 boxes of store-brand pasta, a jar of pasta sauce, a loaf of bread, peanut butter, a bag of rice. I counted out $31 and brought it to the register and watched the total like it was a test I was trying not to fail. I called my father that evening. I could hear noise in the background, music, laughter, other people's celebrations. "Dad," I said, "the gift card doesn't work. There's no money on it." He exhaled slowly. He said he'd look into it. He said Renata handled those things. He said I'd be fine and that he had to get back to dinner. I stood in our kitchen in the quiet of a house that felt suddenly very large and very empty, and I thought about the way he'd said Renata handled those things, as if that settled it. as if her handling of it and her handling of it wrong were somehow my problem to navigate. That night I opened her Instagram, new post from 3 hours ago, a sunset over a golf course, drinks by the pool. The caption, "Family time is the best time." 74 likes, 14 comments. I looked at the photo for a long time and then I went to my desk and got out the journal I hadn't written in since 9th grade started, and I wrote down the date, the amount of money I had left, and what I'd eaten. I don't know exactly why. Something about the way the pool photo looked in the blue light of my phone while I was rationing bread in an empty house. I just needed something to be written down. My neighbor across the street was a retired schoolteacher named Beverly. She had white hair cut short and a garden that she tended with the focused attention of someone who had decided that growing things was the most honest work left. She'd known my mother. They used to talk over the fence in the mornings when I was small, and after my mother died, Beverly brought food to our house for 2 weeks without being asked. Casseroles and banana bread and a pot of soup that she left on the porch when no one answered the door. She noticed the house on day 6. She knocked at 7 in the evening, a careful knock, holding a Tupperware container with both hands. She looked at my face when I opened the door, and I know what she saw, because I had looked at myself in the bathroom mirror that morning and I had not recognized the quality of my own stillness. She said she'd made too much chicken and rice and asked if I wanted some. We both knew she hadn't made too much of anything. I stood there for a moment. I was going to say I was fine. I was going to do what I had been trained to do, which was to make things easy for adults, to not create inconvenience, to confirm that everything was manageable. But I was 6 days in, and I was tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. And Beverly was looking at me with an expression my mother used to have, patient and present, and actually waiting for an answer, and I told her the truth. She sat at our kitchen table while I talked. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "You're going to come over for dinner every night, and we're going to write everything down. Dates, what you ate, what money you have, what your father said on the phone." She paused. "I used to be a teacher," she said. "I know what documentation is for." I ate chicken and rice at her kitchen table that night and for the 11 nights that followed. She put a portion aside for me every evening. She didn't make a show of it. She just left the porch light on. School had started 3 weeks before. I was a sophomore. My English teacher that year was a man named Mr. Hadley, mid-40s, wore reading glasses on a chain around his neck, had a habit of stopping mid-lesson to say, "Hold on, this actually matters," before making a point he thought people were missing. He had assigned a personal essay in the 2nd week of the semester. I had not turned it in. On day 11 I fell asleep during 3rd period. Not the nodding off kind of tired. I went somewhere. I woke up in the nurse's office with a woman I didn't recognize leaning over me, asking in a measured voice when I had last eaten a full meal. The fluorescent lights were very bright. My mouth tasted strange. I told her I'd had pasta that morning. She asked how much. I told her. She put me on the scale. I was down 11 pounds from my last recorded weight in the school system. She asked where my parents were. I told her they were in Arizona. She asked who was home with me. I told her no one. Mr. Hadley was standing in the hallway when I came out of the nurse's office. He must have been notified. He looked at me with the glasses pushed up on his head and said, "Do you want to talk?" Just that. No agenda in his voice. No particular expression. Just an actual question. I said I didn't know. He said, "Okay. My door is open 3rd period if you change your mind." I didn't go to his room that day, but something about the offer sat differently than I expected. I thought about it that night while I ate at Beverly's kitchen table. I thought about it the next morning while I made rice with the burner on the lowest setting so it would last longer. My stepmother called the school before I did. I found this out from Mr. Hadley, who told me gently but directly, the way he delivered information in class, clearly, without softening it past the point of usefulness. She had called to let them know I had a history of seeking attention and that anything I said about my home situation should be taken with, as she apparently put it, appropriate context. She said it before anyone at the school had said anything to her. She said it preemptively. I remember sitting in Mr. Hadley's classroom after the last bell and feeling something shift, not quite anger, not quite fear, something more like recognition. The shape of a thing I had been living inside of for years, but had never seen from the outside before. That evening, I called my father. He answered on the fourth ring. I heard her voice somewhere behind him, asking who it was. I told him the school had weighed me. I told him I had lost 11 pounds. I told him the gift card had no money on it and that I had $9 left and 2 weeks to go. There was a pause. Benny said, in a voice that was lower than usual, that I needed to stop making things difficult. He said this was not a good time. He said Renata had mentioned the school might reach out and that I should remember that embarrassing the family had consequences. He said if I couldn't handle 3 weeks alone at 14, then maybe I needed a different arrangement, somewhere with more structure, and I should think carefully about whether that was what I wanted. I hung up. My hands weren't shaking. That was the part I remember most clearly. I thought they would be, but they weren't. I sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets and I looked at the $9 on the counter, and I thought about the phrase different arrangement and what it meant coming from him. And then I got up and went to my room and got out my phone and pressed record. Today is day 13, I said. I have $9. There is 1 box of pasta left and half a jar of sauce. My father told me not to make things difficult. My stepmother called my school before I called anyone. I am going to keep recording. I recorded every day after that. Short clips, some of them barely 2 minutes but specific. I showed the inside of the refrigerator. I read receipts into the camera with the date and total. I recorded the voicemail my father left 2 days later telling me to stop involving other people in private family matters. I recorded my neighbor Beverly telling me, on camera at her kitchen table, exactly what she had observed across the street over the past 2 weeks, with dates. Beverly was the one who drove me to school on day 16, when I couldn't make myself walk the distance without stopping twice to rest. She waited in the parking lot until she saw me go inside. I went to Mr. Hadley's room before first period. I sat down. I said, I need to show someone something. He watched every clip on my phone. He did not say anything until the last one ended. Then he took off his reading glasses and set them on his desk and said, I'm required to report this. And I want you to know that's not a bad thing. I nodded. I had been waiting, I realized, for someone to say those exact words, not to fix it for me, just to confirm that what I had built was real and that it pointed somewhere. The caseworker assigned to my case was a woman named Ms. Tran. She arrived at our house on day 18 in a gray jacket with a shoulder bag and a manner that was professional in a way that felt kind rather than clinical. She moved through the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, looked at the pantry. She asked if I had anything I wanted to show her. I handed her my phone. She watched without pausing. When the last clip finished, she was quiet, and then she asked a question the way Beverly asked questions, like she already knew part of the answer and wanted to give me space to say the rest. She said, What do you need right now? I said, I need someone to believe me. She said, I do. The legal picture built quickly after that. 18 video clips. A school medical record documenting an 11-pound weight loss over 2 weeks. Text messages and a voicemail obtained with proper authorization. Bank records subpoenaed by the court. My father and stepmother had spent just over $38,000 during their 3-week trip. Resort fees, excursions, a spa package, 2 winery tours, a day trip to Sedona. The gift card left for me had been purchased, but never loaded. The account records showed it had been set up. The funds had not been transferred, and this had not been an accident. The transfer step had been skipped manually. My Aunt Lorraine, who was supposed to check in, had called once, on day 2, and left a voicemail asking if I was okay. I'd said yes. She had not called again. My stepmother had planned a welcome home dinner for the night they returned. She'd texted the neighbors, ordered a cake from the bakery on Burnside, made a playlist, arranged flowers on the kitchen table. I know all of this because I was staying at Beverly's that night. Miss Tran had arranged it, and Beverly told me what she saw from across the street. Cars arriving. The lights in the living room going warm. Music low, coming through the open window. Then 2 patrol cars. Then the music stopping. Beverly said my stepmother came to the door with a glass of wine in her hand. She said the expression on her face when she saw the officers was the kind of expression that takes a moment to arrange. The smile fading and then something else assembling itself in its place. Something that looked like it was trying to be confused but was actually afraid. She said it was a misunderstanding. She said I had a pattern of exaggerating. She said she'd been worried about my mental health for years and that anyone who knew the family would tell you the same thing. She said all of this apparently in the approximate 40 seconds before the officer explained they had documentation and a warrant and asked her and my father to come with them. My father did not say anything. Beverly said he just stood there in the living room doorway, still in the clothes he traveled in, and watched. They both accepted plea agreements. My father received 2 years of probation, a requirement to complete a parenting course, and a fine. My stepmother received probation and community service, a felony child endangerment charge on her record, and a court order barring her from any contact with me. The family court judge terminated both their custodial rights at a separate hearing. She read from her decision in a voice that was precise and without particular dramatics, the way serious things, I've learned, usually sound in real life. Not like movies, just clear. My Aunt Lorraine submitted guardianship paperwork. The court approved it the same week. I did not feel what I expected to feel. I thought I would feel relief in the large, cinematic way. A rush of something, tears maybe, some kind of release. What I actually felt was smaller and quieter than that. More like putting down something heavy that you'd been carrying for so long you'd forgotten it was separate from you. Lorraine lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in northeast Portland with mismatched kitchen chairs and a cat named Pretzel who slept on the radiator and regarded me with the serious eyes of a much older being. She put fresh sheets on the bed in the spare room. She put a set of spare keys on the kitchen counter and said, "These are yours." She asked what I wanted for dinner and then she went to the store and bought it. She came to every school event I had that year. She put them in her phone calendar and set reminders and showed up. I kept waiting for the other shoe, for the patience to expire, for the warmth to have a limit, for the small print to appear. It didn't. I'm 28 now. I work as a paralegal at a family law firm in Portland. I took that job on purpose. I see, in my work, a particular kind of document. Protective orders, custody filings, emergency placements, and I know how to read them because I understand what they're for. I understand that a piece of paper, correctly filled out and submitted at the right time, can change the direction of someone's life. I found a letter in my email 2 months ago. It came through the court's official forwarding system. She'd had to go through proper legal channels to send it because of the no-contact order, which expired when I turned 18. My stepmother wrote that she had been in therapy for several years. She wrote that she understood what she had done. She wrote that she hoped I was well, and then, after a pause that I could almost feel in the white space on the page, she wrote that she had no right to expect anything from me. She was right that she didn't. I read the letter twice. I put it in a folder. I haven't responded. I've thought about it in the way you think about doors that you're not sure whether to open, turning the handle over in your mind without committing to the motion. Maybe I will someday. Maybe I won't. That decision belongs to me, and I didn't always understand that I was allowed to have things that belonged to only me. My father sent a card at Christmas, 2 years after the plea agreement. A generic card, the kind you buy in a gas station. A candle on a snowfield, no message printed inside, just his signature and nothing else. I put it in the same folder. Beverly still tends her garden across the street from my old house. I visited her last spring, and she made coffee and we sat on her porch, and she asked how my work was going and listened to the whole answer. She's 81 now and she still has the sharpest eyes of anyone I've ever known. Before I left, she held my hand for a moment on the porch steps and said, "You were always going to be okay. I just needed to make sure you had enough time." I think about that sometimes. What it means to give someone enough time. What it costs and what it doesn't cost, and the fact that sometimes it really is that simple. Someone deciding that your survival is worth an hour of their evening, a porch light left on, a Tupperware container held in both hands. I was 14 and I had $40 in a gift card with no money on it, and I was in a house that had been arranged to look like a home without actually being one. I was also paying attention. I was writing things down. I was building something small and specific and real at a kitchen table while someone across the street kept the light on. They thought my silence was something they had already secured. They had been training me for it for years, to take up less space, to make things easy, to confirm whatever story was being told about me. They thought 14 years of that was enough. It wasn't. It was just enough to make me careful. Have you ever had someone rearrange the facts of your own life and then look at you like you should be grateful for the new version? Like the story they were telling about you was a gift you were too difficult to appreciate. I spent a long time learning how to hold the original version steady, to say, no, that's not what happened. Here is what actually happened. Here is the date and the time and the £11 and the $9 on the counter. Here is what I wrote down. I've thought a lot about what actually made the difference. Not the caseworker, not the court, not the plea agreement. Those were outcomes. What made the difference was smaller than that. It was a 14-year-old sitting on a kitchen floor with $9 on the counter, deciding to press record instead of going to bed. Nobody taught me to do that. Renata had spent 5 years teaching me the opposite, that my version of events was unreliable, that my feelings were inconvenient, that the most useful thing I could be was quiet, and in a way that I find hard to explain without it sounding like I'm crediting her for something. All of that training backfired, because when you spend years learning that no one will believe you without evidence, you start collecting evidence. You start collecting evidence. You start writing things down. The very thing she used to diminish me was what made me precise. That's the part that stays with me, not the injustice of it. I've made a kind of peace with the injustice, but the strange logic of cause and effect, the way the thing that was meant to silence me became the exact set of skills I needed to be heard. My father was not a cruel man. I want to say that plainly because I think it matters. He was a man who made a long series of small choices, to look away, to defer, to stay quiet in doorways, and those small choices accumulated into something that functioned exactly like cruelty, even if it never felt that way to him. That's a harder thing to sit with than simple malice. Simple malice has a clear shape. What my father did had the shape of nothing, of absence, of a man who just kept not acting until not acting became its own kind of harm. I work in family law now, and I see that pattern constantly. The parent who didn't hit anyone, who didn't scream, who just wasn't there, who let things happen, who stood in doorways and said nothing. The courts have a harder time with that kind. The paperwork is messier, but the damage lands the same way. Beverly used to say that paying attention is an act of love. She said it simply, the way she said most things, sitting at her kitchen table with her coffee going cold because she was too focused on listening to remember to drink it. I didn't fully understand what she meant when I was 14. I do now. What she gave me those 3 weeks wasn't just dinner. It was someone who looked at me and saw what was actually there, not what was convenient to see. That's rarer than people think. And it costs almost nothing except the willingness to do it. I'm not who I would have been if things had gone differently. I know that. There's a version of me who was quieter, more convinced that her own experience wasn't worth documenting, more willing to accept the edited version of herself that other people found easier to manage. I don't know her well. I think I would have been kind to her if I'd met her. I think I would have wanted to hand her a journal and say, write it down, all of it, the dates and the amounts and the exact words. Not because anyone will necessarily believe you, but because you will. And that turns out to be where it starts. The porch light Beverly left on every night. I think about that more than almost anything else from that time. Such a small thing, 40 watts maybe. A 2-second decision each evening. And I walked toward it every single night because it was the only warm thing in my direct line of sight. Sometimes that's all it takes, not a rescue, not a dramatic intervention, just someone deciding, quietly and without announcement, that your direction home matters enough to light